Behold, the bearer of 3 crowns, the guardian of law, the ruler of the settler lords, the hero of Mount Erd, protector of the royal cities and the dwarfs, his majesty, Habrot, king of the Askians, lord of Ecker, lord of Apatan, count of Hubenmark.
Alright, do you want to tell me how to address a ruler?
Yeah, so this is basically about our experiences with running audiences with rulers, kings and the like, etiquette at court, and these kind of social encounters. In many games, player characters will meet at some point a ruler of some sort. We're going, for now, with a very typical setup, like a ruler meeting them at their own court in public. I will assume a queen, a lord, some kind of noble feudal ruler. But I think the same principles basically apply to many other situations and settings, and we can get into it later probably. First thing I want to talk about is what do we want to avoid in this kind of encounter? And most importantly, I think we don't want to trap players. A worst case version of that would be something like a player says or does something that they think is harmless, but the GM goes, no, you just broke this or that rule of etiquette. You didn't bow to the king, you spoke without being asked, you didn't say the ruler's title, you used the wrong address, and now all the important NPCs are mad at you, you get arrested, you failed the encounter.
Yeah.
And I have seen that happen in games.
We've been there.
Yeah, and we don't want that. Trust me, we don't. And we also don't want players to be afraid of that. I have seen players act extremely timid in these kinds of encounters and not talk at all because they're afraid to say the wrong thing and have these repercussions. And that is also mostly bad. Like, the fear takes away their agency. And then another thing that we also don't want is anarchy. No rules, no etiquette, just let the players behave however they will. We don't want a player talk to the queen and shout like, "Hey grandma, shut up!" Because that is also bad. And that is bad because the players will feel like this NPC has no real authority and no real power in the world. And the world will make less sense. Like, why are other people polite? Why do they take orders from this grandma who engages in ugly shouting matches with random people? So that means we need etiquette. We need players to follow it most of the time, but we don't want it to be annoying or intimidating for the players. I will now briefly talk about 2 ways to avoid these problems. And then I will discuss another way that I love because it doesn't just solve the problem, it adds something interesting to the encounter. The first is very basic and it's usually a good idea. And it goes like this. As a game master, when a player says or does something in character that I think is obviously inappropriate and breaks protocol, I will halt the game for a moment and ask them, do you really want to say that? And I explain that your character would know this is very impolite and the character expects that people will react poorly to it. I give the player the option to retract and have the character not say the bad thing, and I give the player the option to have them say the bad thing, but not be surprised when the reaction is bad.
Yes.
I think this is generally a good thing to do as a game master, allow players to make informed choices. And you can justify this with the principle that the character probably knows more about the world they live in and its customs than the player who only gets to live in that world for 5 hours a week or less. The characters know how to behave, and the GM knows it, so the GM can help the players out. And you can go one step further with this, that's the second method, and make social encounters more abstract in general. It goes like this. The player talks, and the character's knowledge sort of translates their words into something else when necessary. The character expresses these things in a way that is appropriate and doesn't offend, in this case, the ruler. And you can tie this to a skill or a roll of dice to determine how good the character is at speaking politely and knowing etiquette. And this is fine. But it has a few downsides. It means that players are not actually speaking in character. I find it not very immersive, and I think there is a more interesting way to do such things most of the time. Now, this is my third and preferred way of running audiences and generally conversations with rulers. I will prepare beforehand a small number of rules specifically about how to talk to the ruler, and I will tell them to the characters. This will be really just 1 or 2 rules. It must include how to address the ruler, and it can include something you must do or something you must not do when you talk to them. It can be really as simple as always address the queen as Your Highness, and do not raise your voice, she hates noise. Now, the reason I like this solution better is the idea of giving players what I call agency through knowledge. If the players know the rules, they can make conscious decisions on how to interact with them. They can follow the rule and feel much safer speaking in character. They can purposefully break the rule to make a scene. Players sometimes want to make a scene. And they can even sometimes be smart and use these rules to their advantage. And that is because for this idea to work, the rules have to apply to NPCs as well. To go into that for a moment, the actions of NPCs at court have a new dimension if the players know the rules. If an NPC is incompetent at court, you can show that by having them not know the rules and get a bad reaction from the court. Like, a farmer may speak loud and displease the queen. A foreigner may call her Your Excellency, showing they don't know the customs of this court. NPCs who are socially skilled can show that through their mastery of the rules and how to use them to their advantage. Like, scheming nobles, for example, might whisper about secret conspiracy, but when confronted, say they just didn't want to make noise because the queen doesn't like it. And if an NPC makes a scene and breaks the rules, then the players will understand, like the rest of the court, that they just witnessed something outrageous. Like, if you ever have a character say words like, "How dare he shout at her highness?" you have straight up won RPGs.
As a GM, I guess.
Yeah, as a GM, you won. That's
the highest level of play interaction you can hope for.
Yeah. So this much just about NPCs following the same rules. The rules, and that's another thing I like about the method, can tell the players something about this ruler and this society, what is important to them and how they think. And I will end with an example from one of my games. You played in it. We have a medieval fantasy game. The players have a brief audience with the king of the realm, and they were told by his scribe that there are 2 rules. First rule: if you are the king's subject, you address him as my king. If you are not his subject, you address him as your majesty. Second rule: You don't say no to the king, you add to what he said. To break it down for a moment, the first rule does three things. One, it lets players know how to address the king. Now they can talk to the king in character, they can be polite, or they can be purposefully rude. They have basic agency through knowledge. Second thing, it also gives the players an opportunity to say something about their character. The rule asks the question, does the character live here and regard themselves as a subject of this king? And say, my king? Are they from somewhere else, or think of themselves as subject to no king? Then they can say, your majesty. And you have to make a choice and tell your friends and the NPCs about your character. And the other characters and the NPCs also make that same choice, and you learn something about them. And then finally, the rule also says something about this monarchy. And this isn't obvious, and I didn't lore dump the players at the time. But if any of them asked, I could have explained that there is a symbolic meaning to it. My king sets the focus on the relationship between the king and his people. He is not a king, he is your king. A foreign lord must use the more formal address, your majesty, but as his subject you can talk to him in this more familiar way, even if you're just a peasant in his realm. You have a privileged relationship with him, at least in theory. On the flip side, it reaffirms that he has authority over you, and everyone can see it. Like, if you deny or disobey someone right after publicly calling him my king, that would look really bad. And this plays into the second rule, don't say no to the king. This rule is about avoiding disrespect. Nobody publicly contradicts the king, nobody denies him and questions his authority, at least not explicitly. But the second part of the rule once again gives the players options. You can't say no, but you can add to what the king said. You can say, yes, my king, satisfying the formality, but then say, we should consider also, and say almost the opposite of what he just said. And the king may not like it, but you are still behaving in a way that is acceptable. To summarize, both rules together in the example accomplish: number one, no anarchy. The king will be spoken to with respect. Number two, the players know what to do, what not to do, and what to do instead. They have agency through knowledge, and they don't have to be afraid to speak in character. 3, they are being asked a question about their characters. And 4, there is some optional lore and symbolism behind it all. And that is how I like to run rulers, and audiences specifically, but also social etiquette more generally in my games. Make very few, very explicit rules, make sure the players know them in character, and also apply them to your NPCs. And I have a second example later, but I would just open the discussion now and hear your thoughts.
First of all, I really like that you put in the caveat that the NPCs have to adhere to the same rules. Because as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh, yeah, it makes so much sense, because then you can communicate so much about how the dynamic works just by how the NPCs interact with the ruler. It actually reminded me of the hand kiss thing in one of our campaigns.
I remember that.
Yeah, where your character was out of the court for a while and then said, oh, now hand kissing works a little differently. Like, we don't kiss, but we like blow a kiss on the knuckles.
Yeah, we don't touch the lips to the hand anymore. Yeah. And my character, who was a noble, had to like adapt to the new fashion trend that developed while she was not at court.
But the same thing, it gave you agency through knowledge, as you call it.
Yeah.
Because you now could look at how people gave hand kisses to determine, are they up to date on the modern rules for like how being polite works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. It was
So-
good. Fashion in general.
Yeah.
Without going on a large tangent about fashion, we need to
We
make
need
a
to-
video
Yeah.
at some point. But fashion can serve really well as a part of etiquette.
So I made a lot of notes.
Right, let's just
yeah.
go through them for the moment.
But what I wanted to say is like I prepared one specific question that I thought would probably come up,
All right.
which is how, if at all, should a GM enforce the way to address a noble, which is specifically what your third example is about.
Right, but I actually wanted to ask you that because that is something I always struggle with. I will have rules and I will have NPCs that behave like they should, and then players will at some point break rules, and I will sit there not really knowing what to do now. Like, how do I have NPCs react to that in a way that is in character, that is maybe measured, but that enforces the rule on the one side, but on the other hand, sort of keeps the encounter going and doesn't insta-fail it.
Yeah, so like how I usually do it with the nobles I currently run is I have different camps of people that have a different view on how their titles and how the way they should be addressed is important to them. For example, Balach he's very allergic to being called something highly. He doesn't like to be spoken as like a lord because he isn't, and he feels like it's insulting to him. So when someone does it, but I also know he's in the camp of people that there is not a real consequence to speaking wrong to him. He will just tell you off. Like, he will give you the finger and tell you that you're a piece of shit, and you will have to call him you.
Yeah.
Why?
I remember we did that.
Yeah, exactly.
I was given the finger because
Yeah, he'll just go, you piece of
didn't
shit.
remember.
I'm not a lord. You won't address me as a lord, or else I'm literally gonna put my fist up your ass. And the man is like a Goliath, so that's a real threat.
that's a big fist.
Then on the other hand is his sister, like his half sister Gizmo. Wait, she's his cousin, not his half sister. I just realized. Yeah. Who is also very allergic, but in her case, it's because it's very important to her that people use the right term because she is the Baroness in waiting.
Yeah, and she depends on harboring this respect and like establishing herself as an authority figure in the realm because she wants to take it over.
But because that is so important to her, I made it part of her character to, if someone addresses her wrongly, she will also be like, you will address me by my proper title. Because in her case, it is important to her to let people know. So I'm very happy to actually let players walk into the trap because there isn't a bad consequence.
Yeah, and she likes to use the opportunity to tell everyone again that her title is very important.
Right. Then there are also the lords that have very negative consequences if spoken wrongly to, and are very like nitpicky about it. And in these cases, I actually like to do one of your examples where I'm gonna pause and be like, this character does hate if you use the wrong title for him. So Daniel in that example, if you want to say that, be warned that he will take it as an insult. And then there's a very different camp of nobles that are just very okay with just about everything as long as it's not above their station, which Margaret would be.
Yeah.
Where she's like, you can call me you can call me lady, you can call me Lady Knight, but do not call me anything above my station, especially not Baroness.
Yeah.
Even though technically, because of the marriage, that would be a title that would be alright for me to use.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So, to answer my own question in that case, I wouldn't actually enforce that characters have to speak, have to address properly, as long as you can tell a story with it. Like, if there is an NPC that is higher, but can twist what the character said into something to tell the character something about themselves, it's usually the better way to be like, I think you just misspoke. Last time I checked, I was Duchess. And not just
Yeah.
Baroness or Countess.
Yeah.
I hope... Yeah, no, Duchess is the highest. I
Duchess
think,
is the highest of the three, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to go about it. Like, know your NPCs, have a general idea about what they think of their own rank and position.
Yeah.
And then you will know how they react to such things. But then also, like, maybe to specify my question, I have... My players are something else sometimes, and they will be rude, and they will be purposefully rude. And then what do I do? Like, no, I had the rules of etiquette here. I told them to you. You knew them. You didn't want to be polite. You wanted to make a scene. You wanted to upset this person. You succeeded. They are upset now. But how do I, like, round up this scene that is going on? Like, the problem of they are here now, they are loud mouthing, and the court should react negatively and the ruler should react negatively, but how?
So the big problem, I think, that it's very obvious is the usual threats of like violence against the characters or imprisonment or something like are stuff that doesn't really work in more epic fantasy or in heroic fantasy. If I would tell even the Hornbreakers, who are our current campaign, that yeah, you're gonna be taken prisoner now, there is a very good chance at least one character would try to just fight his way out.
Yeah, we have some who would start a fight.
Yeah. So what I'm usually trying to do, and I have been the shitty GM that was like, you're getting arrested, you can't do anything, no, you can't roll checks, you're in prison now. That sucks.
It does.
It super sucks. Nobody's happy. The GM least of all, because they just ruined their own story.
Yeah.
So what I now tend to do is, how can I... And that sounds really bad, but like, how can I hurt the character's ego at this moment? Like, one of the things I was doing at some point was like, you're shit-mouthing the literal Duchess of this realm. You're here, you're calling her names, you're being an absolute asshole. She starts smirking, she claps, and her royal fool starts to play the drums in the way you're talking and he, in the rhythm of your talk, starts playing the drums, and the cause starts laughing at you because you're literally making a fool out of yourself. It's the worst thing.
But no, I like it.
Players hate it.
Yeah.
It's very mean. You should use it very sparingly if your players really try to break a power dynamic, because there is a noble, and as shitty as it is, they are above the players. It can be fun later then, when your players actually gain titles or something, they come back to this court where they have been laughed at. And then it's a fun revenge story suddenly, where like, who's the fool now? And it's still them, but they can feel cool.
Still them.
And I really enjoy it, especially to do when the players are right about something, but they're dicks about it.
Yes.
So, for example, in that case, they came to the court, they spoke to the Duchess, and they were like, there is a monster, we know it's coming, you will give us these things, and men, and money, and weapons. And she was like, you will not make demands at my own court. And then they started name-calling, like, you idiot, the monster is coming, and then they're getting laughed out of the court, and have to kill the monster on their own, and they come back and like, we were right, see? And that's also a cool thing, but still, they would have had such a more easy time if they would have been nice.
Yes.
And so in the end, like, it worked out, but it would have been so much easier.
Yes, I think the obvious consequence is, like, you lose the cooperation of the person you are insulting. And for that reason also that I like to think of nobles and like public figures as under pressure by their environment.
Yes.
So I think at this point, when they are calling the Duchess an idiot, she cannot help them.
Yeah.
Because she would, by now helping them, she would like agree with them
Yeah.
in some way, and her court, everyone around her would see it and would now say, oh, so this is how you can treat our Duchess.
Exactly.
And she will lose power, she will lose esteem. So rulers, I think, are like, they project power and they have power, and we want to show that they have power, but at the same time we can think of them as game masters as answering to their own pressures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I think now that you just said it, what it came to me was, as nobles are constantly under their own pressure from their social situations, surely they're, because like it's a very bad idea to be like the Duchess now snaps and their guards come up and be like, get out of here. But instead, I think what you could do is portray how the nobles need to get into camps. Like either they're with the players trying to humiliate the Duchess to further themselves in the hierarchy, to show like, oh, I'm way higher than you made me believe. Or they will try to keep the Duchess at their privileged position, which could lead to someone stepping out and like, you dare, and throwing down like a glove.
Right. To curry favor with the ruler.
And in that case, you have an individual that has agency deciding to step in while their lady is being insulted, instead of just having a no-name guard stepping in being like, that's enough.
I really like that, because I also like to signify the importance of powerful characters by having the players interact with intermediaries, and not immediately go to the king, but like many levels below that, to show that the king is really somebody important, and you must also be important to even see them. I like to do that sometimes, and also I like what you did because it will show the power of a person if, without even asking, others will run to do their bidding.
Yeah.
Or run to defend their honor. Like she can just sit there, and she knows there are nobles in this faction who will step in as intermediaries and deal with these people.
And I think it's also working because it sidesteps one of the biggest problems, I think, in situations like that, and that is an overindulgence in the possibility of violence. I have seen so many court scenes where the GM was like, oh, the king snaps, and behind him 10 arbalest men show up, or like 100 guards come in, or he claps and the two gargoyles start looking at you with their laser eyes.
Yeah, that would be like, imagine being like a noble at that court, and you know that the king on his snip of a finger has like overwhelming violence to direct at anyone. Like, yes, very specific rulers like tyrants can be portrayed like that, and you will feel that throughout the court. Everyone will be in terror of them, but that is not how you want to handle a neutral or beneficial ruler.
Especially because you absolutely do not want to show the players that whatever they did is of such big concern, of such great aggravating injury to the ruler, that they would deem that necessary.
Yes.
At what point would, like, if you come to visit me and you bring a friend and he's an absolute dick, At what point would I just pull my gun and say, get out of my house?
Yeah, no.
Because at first I'm like, get out of my house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, listen, buddy, I don't like you here. I know you're a friend, but I don't like this. Just leave. How insane would I have to be to pull a gun? Like, I don't have a gun, but if I had.
Yeah, if you had. No, that would not be
But that's the next
a
point.
thing that regularly happens. Like, I think the other person would literally have to get violent themselves in my house for me to use violence to remove them.
Yes. And also just because of the example, actually, as stupid as it is, showing that the king just has a gun that he pulls out as soon as the adventure is becoming. Why does he have that gun?
Yeah.
I don't have a gun because I don't need it. Me having a gun is weird and unnecessary. The king having 10 arbalest archers just behind his throne is weird and unnecessary. The king doesn't need to have that.
No, not if he is actually in a position of real power in this place. No, he doesn't need that. He has retinue that would step in of their own agency, and he has the general respect of the room, and he has so many tools of power that he doesn't need an immediate threat of violence at his disposal.
Yeah. And even if it does not need to be the medieval equivalent or the fantasy equivalent of a nuclear bomb.
No.
I can have one Queen's Guard stepping in front of the throne and being like, you have said enough, leave. And if the players won't leave then it still doesn't have to be, okay, the Queen's Guard draws her sword. It still can be, I challenge you to a duel. I demand you meet me at the tourney ring, or something like that. Or throw your weapons down, we will have a fist fight to even amuse the person you just insulted as a kind of recompense or something like that.
Yes.
There are so many ways before absolute escalation is necessary.
No, I think that answers it really well.
Nice.
I think that we have discussed a lot of tools now that we can deploy in such situations.
Right. My next question would have
let's
been
move on to that.
how to avoid trapping as a GM, and I think we talked about that. But still, to go back to it, we said we have a lot of tools. We can imply the two rules to be like, you now have informed decisions to make. You know what's happening. If a player just honestly does something stupid, we can be like, hold on, your character would know better. Do you really want to say that? Because that will be a problem. Yeah.
Also, and we do that all the time, but maybe not everyone does it, you can have, give other characters the ability to step in.
Yes.
When there is a character who actually wouldn't know better because they're Tarzan from the woods.
Yes.
And they have never seen a king in their life.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know better. But there is also a character in the group who knows society, and you can turn to that player and tell them, oh, you see what he's about to do.
Yeah.
You can stop them.
Yeah, still, the biggest tool as a GM we have is our control over time. So even in a situation of someone being like, I attack the man in the funny pointy golden head and I draw my sword, you as a GM have the power to split that second into 100 actions for every non-violent NPC and PC around. I had multiple moments where a player just wanted to be toxic and aggressive and try to attack or insult. And so I said to the others in the group, you see what's about to happen, you see what he, she, they are about to do. How do you react? And yes, the player that wants to be needlessly an asshole, basically, they will hate that.
Yes.
But the rest of the group will be very thankful for not having to deal with the bad decisions of a single person.
Yes.
And that's actually such a good, it's such a good method, and I started using it in combat with people that say, I charge. Now I charge. Door charges in. Where I'm gonna be, okay, so all of you knew obviously ahead of time that Dor would do that as soon as you see the enemy. How did you prepare? And yes, Dor did say, no, I charge right now. I'm like, yes, door, you will charge. It is right now, but before this happened, all of the others got a moment to prepare so that the thief could sneak behind the group, the mage started preparing a spell, and then door charges. And door still had all of the options
Right.
to be butting in.
Yes, and then you get these more cinematic moments of tension between
Yes.
violence and non-violence that I like really much. It's not just like initiative is rolled,
Yeah.
now it's all talking, now it's all fighting. You get these moments of someone wants to point their sword at the king, but you can have the other player like halt and
I want to get in.
yes,
you hold
and
me back.
you grab your sword and the other stays your hand. And
Yes.
there will be the like doesn't always work obviously, and it depends on what the players do and want to do, but it like giving them the opportunity to do such things I think can lead to beautiful situations and to a tension of will there be escalation or will there not be, that I find more interesting than having the binary between conversation and combat.
One great thing there, funnily enough, the Doctor Who role-playing game does.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically initiative works color-coded. You roll initiative, but you declare a color, green, orange, or red. Talkers, green, go in before actors, orange, go before fighters, red.
Okay.
So to model what happens in the show, basically, no matter how bad you rolled, a 1 initiative in green is still worth more than a 20 in orange, and a 1 in orange is still worth more than a 20 in red. But it means like you see the Dalek is aiming at you, it will shoot. I try to talk, you try to like jam the door so that it goes down, and a third person tries to shoot the Dalek back. And so I have the opportunity to talk, you have the opportunity to try closing the door, and the last person, if all fails, can still shoot the Dalek.
Yeah.
And then it's the Dalek's initiative against our fighter's initiative, but I will always get my chance. The Dalek will never shoot before I talked or before you try to slam the door.
I really like that, but actually let's save that topic of
for another video.
like initiative and because I'm completely unfamiliar. I've been unfamiliar with that idea, but I'm very intrigued.
Okay.
Let's make a video about this at some point.
I will.
And maybe move on.
Yeah. I liked how you said we should allow players to make informed choices, and I added we should allow players to make bad informed choices.
I completely agree.
Because often I was asked how I, as a GM, deal with the loss of limbs, for example. And I keep saying, I will tell a person, you can do what you just said, but you might lose your arm, a finger, an eye. And in that moment, people look at me, and I can see them think and say, no. But sometimes they will say, that's worth it. And so at one point I had a player risking to go blind by aggressive birds to save his brother, and he never regretted it.
Yes.
Because he was the person to make the call. And so in the same way, I think if I get the knowledge of like, if I call the queen, basically if I break one of the 2 rules, if I call the queen something that would break one of the 2 rules, I will make a stupid decision, but I make it. I know what I'm getting myself into, and if the game master says, you will risk incarceration for that, they will try to arrest you and put you in a pen with the pigs for a night, I can't say that's worth it just so I don't have to like kiss the queen's ass for something I don't know, transphobic she just said. Because fuck her. But if I would say, hey, you can't say that, like, she's a woman, no matter what you say, and then I get incarcerated, like, put in with the pigs for a night, but I didn't know it would happen. It's a stupid example in that, obviously, it's a very stupid one, but I would rather be the person that cool decides to do it.
Yes.
Like with a hero sacrifice.
Yes.
I stay behind because I know what will
Yes.
happen, not just like despite that I know.
Yes, and also that that example brings me to something else that I think is a good tool to use, which is, even though your group may enter as a group, as a party,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean NPCs have to treat them as a monolith. If
Yeah.
one player breaks etiquette, gets on the bad side of a ruler or an authority figure, that doesn't mean they have to hate the entire group now. They can specifically direct their ire at this person.
Yeah.
And the good thing that does is two things. One is the rest of the players don't feel like they are being punished for what this one friend did.
Yeah.
And the other thing is they now get a choice of how to position themselves in the ensuing conflict. Like, they can say, my bond to this person is so strong, I will stand with them even if I too draw the ire of the ruler, and I will put myself in the line of fire, and that is a great gesture of companionship. Or they can take a different position and like physically or verbally or through some other manner distance themselves from their friend to keep the ruler's favor, gain the ruler's favor even, but also create some drama within the party.
Yeah, and I think what you say, it's such a good thing what you're bringing up here, because it's not only relevant for rulers, but actually, if you remember, we had a situation like that just a while ago in our Odom campaign, where basically Ruben had to sit out one session, and when he came back, the others just had killed a druid from their people in servitude of the Iron Lords. And when you rejoined them and found out, they also found his apprentice, and she was not treating you as a group, as a monolith,
Yes.
but instead talked to each of you, trying to figure out who's on her side. Because basically, the druid had killed people from the other nation, but the nations are at war.
Oh, the druid was a monster. Like,
Definitely.
outright terrible person,
Literally.
terrible monster. Still serving his role as a shaman, as a keeper of the life tree, but in a sort of evil way, definitely evil way. And my character had a very different view, had a very different position in that conflict than the others, and had also not participated in killing him. So it was, that was great. We were a group, but we could still be addressed and interacted with as individuals by the NPCs, and I really like that. That's just something I wanted to add as an additional tool for social encounters in general, I think.
It's pretty good. Basically, it's all my questions. So, do you want to present your last example?
We'll go with the second example. Yes. Now it's somewhat spoiler for you. You are in the group, but we are not playing it for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
It's not a big spoiler. So to introduce, the game was set in Normandy in northern France during the Viking Age. And Richard, the ruler of Normandy, is a descendant of Danish Vikings, but is now a Christian and a vassal of the Frankish king. Now, when the players would come at some point in the future to his court, I planned to have an NPC tell them this rule. Like his father and grandfather, Richard is Jarl, but by the grace of the king, he is also Duke. Either title is correct. Jarl is the Norse heathen sort of title, and Duke is a very high Frankish title. He has both.
Can I chime in here?
Let me continue.
Yeah,
Like,
okay.
and then the NPC would actually tell them, if you want to honor his proud ancestry and his glory as a warrior, or if you want to smear him as an uncultured heathen, you say Jarl. If you want to praise his high rank and Christian virtue, or if you want to say he got soft and sucked up to the Southerners, you say Duke.
Okay, I didn't expect that. I was like, oh, clever. Like you said before, you make a choice out of it. I can either be like, oh, I side with the Normans and call him a Jarl, or I can side with the Christians and call him a Duke. But in that case, it's...
Yeah, the idea is either title has good and bad implications, and each title is polite, but can also be used to subtly or not so subtly insult the ruler, and the players can use that when they talk to him, talk about them, or hear others talk to him or about him. So the rule 1 makes sure respect is formally paid, no total anarchy. 2 gives the players a wide range of agency through knowledge, and 3 tells them something about the setting and the political conflicts in Richard's court.
And also the person telling them that.
Yes.
And probably he's not saying that in a vacuum either.
No.
Because that's probably then a very common way how people treat these two titles.
Yes, exactly. That is... and I would have NPCs... I would have had NPCs on the scene using both and have like a Norman chieftain...
Calling him a Duke.
Calling him Duke. Like... What? You're giving money to fund a monastery? Like, Duke.
Absolute Duke move. Absolute Duke move.
Yes, and but then also like have one of his Danish generals go, my Jarl, and have one of the Christian nobles go, Duke.
That's super fascinating. I'm actually looking forward to this because Evangeline has mixed heritage and reveres like the pantheon and God. So for her, this is a really big dilemma. And maybe even if like someone with that is omnigender, where you switch through he, she, they, whatever they prefer, maybe she would even have to be like my Jarl, my Duke, my Jarl, to satisfy her own like inner turmoil when it comes to how she views royalty in that case.
I don't quite get the gender part of it.
So there's omnigender, which means people that are fine with multiple pronouns.
Yes.
And want them to be used mixed.
Yes.
And so for Evangeline, it might be that she would have to address Richard.
Because like being fine with multiple genders, it's with multiple cultures for her.
Yeah.
Right.
And in her case, she identifies both as a Viking and a French, or like a Norman.
A Frank.
Yeah. And so it's like both are important to her. So she might be in the trouble of like, I need to use both all the time. But both respectful, like being this just sweaty mess, calling him his dukish jarldom.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah,
my poor girl.
That would just be like another example of how I think making these rules and like thinking about them beforehand can do even more for the encounter than just satisfying the agency through knowledge of players can talk in character and don't get trapped, and making sure that there's no anarchy. I think like depending on what the situation and the culture and the court is, you can do more with these things, and you can give an element. It's like an environmental element in a combat arena that people can interact with. Like, you can roll with that barrel, and there's the barrel, and we know we can use it. And in the same way, I would put a barrel in the social encounter in the form of thought out rule that can be used in the
Also,
court.
I think with this one, you've made the decision and the thought process a toy, basically. It's very fun to think about it that way. And I think if you make it interesting to consider the titles, you won't have the problem with players accidentally forgetting. So, because in that moment, I've spent so much time just now thinking about, ooh, would I say Jarl and mean it or be mean? Would I say Duke and mean it or be mean? Could I, would I, which would I? Then I think like if you can manage to do that as one of the rules or both rules even in an encounter, the players would even like to interact and to address correctly.
I think that is the ultimate goal. Like,
Yeah.
if interacting with etiquette is actually fun, that is all we can want. That is like, I think that would be what we can be aiming for when designing social encounters with etiquette.